Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, The Trusted Insider Threat, Lessons Learned from WikiLeaks, sponsored by NitroSecurity. I'm Greg Masters, Managing Editor of SC Magazine, and presenting today is Jeremy Conway, Senior Security Analyst at NitroSecurity. WikiLeaks has generated an enormous amount of media coverage and initiated heated debate about whether the release of confidential government information is an act of treason or an effort at transparency. In either scenario, the question of inside threats has alarmed executives and security personnel charged with ensuring internal data remains protected. There is no silver bullet solution. It must be addressed at multiple levels and with multiple collaborating technologies to provide the most complete prevention and detection strategy possible. Jeremy will be discussing lessons learned from WikiLeaks and the strategies and technologies available today that can best address this multi-layered threat. There will be a Q&A session following the presentation, so we encourage you to ask any questions via the interface. And Jeremy's presentation will be available on the NitroSecurity website, nitrosecurity.com/webcast, I believe beginning tomorrow. So with that, let's turn it over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Greg, for the kind introduction, and welcome everybody. My name is Jeremy Conway. As you said, I'm a Senior Security Analyst for NitroSecurity. And we're gonna go over the WikiLeaks use case, and more importantly, we're gonna talk about the Trusted Insider. Most of the technical overview and stuff, when we get into the technology behind it and identifying it and understanding it, will be based on the WikiLeaks use case. But the more important thing here is that the WikiLeaks scenario or use case isn't really something new or something that we didn't know of, or as technology gotten better, is something that we experienced because of technology. And I want to make that clear when we go through here. That's why I'm going to go through some historical insider examples first off. And then we'll talk about some of the advantages that the insider has in our infrastructures, in our organizations, and how they use those advantages to get around our normal type of monitoring, our normal type of procedures, and our policies and our risk management stuff. We'll go through that, and then we'll look specifically at the WikiLeaks use case, and we'll try to address it. All right. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what the insider really is, right? So by the definition that I took off my research and how I accept it is it's basically a current or former employee or contractor who intentionally exceeds or misuses his or her authorization level for network, system, or data access in a manner that affects the security of an organization's data systems and or daily business processes. Right, so it's a current person or a contractor. It could actually be a former employee that still has credentials or something like that. They have this extended knowledge of the environment because they've either worked for or contracted to an organization. And the most common scenario for a trusted insider, and it's not always limited to this, but I would say that 90% of the time it falls within these categories. The insider utilizes this information technology to steal and or modify our data for the following purposes. They either have something that they want to gain from it, such as financial gain, where they're taking maybe our proprietary information or information to another organization in like a job transfer or something like that, or they're going to sell this information to another government or to another organization. Another reason they would use it is for corporate or business advantage. The insider could be somebody that's taking this information and is going to take it to another organization or another company to sell it to them, and they didn't get the advantages. Or that person could be the insider hired by another organization to do this. And then another use case would be like sabotage, where the trusted insider is somebody that maybe we unintentionally made mad by, hey, we're going to do some layoffs, or maybe they didn't get the bonus that they thought they should get for this year or something like that, and they use their insider knowledge to mess up our systems in some way, or do something to it so that something doesn't work right, maybe give our organization a bad name or something like that. And then there's the other cases where they're just being defiant, right? It's defiant. And that's where they don't agree with the organization's stance on a certain situation or a certain viewpoint, and they take this information and publish it out there somewhere, or they give it to somebody, and it's like an act of defiance. And then the last one, if they don't really fit in those categories, you could probably fit it into they're just out to cause harm within the organization. So what do insiders target? Trusted insiders are applicable to all organizations. You know, it's not a specific organization like just the government. With the WikiLeaks use case, the government's taken a pretty big wake-up call on that. So it's not just them, though. We have to understand that it's everybody, and it's not just the government and like the Department of Defense, but it's also like the civilian government, such as NASA and Health and Human Services, Congress, court systems, local governments. It's not just a national problem. It's not just a national state problem. It's it's at all levels. And it's the people that are contracting to those government organizations, such as, the bigger companies like Boeing and Raytheon, but not even just them. It's the smaller companies that develop some, individual technology that maybe they only have 15, 16 people employed. They could have an insider that would sell this information to somebody else or publish this information. Or they could have access to, secret information or confidential information. So it's at all levels. But it's also in other industries, too, such as banking and finance, information technology companies. It's very predominant in information technology companies because you get employees that shift fairly rapidly in information technology. It's not as frowned upon to change jobs in information technology at a shorter rate, such as 1 year, 2 year turnaround, where in traditional places like in government employees and stuff, they'll stay there for 15 years. So you have the insider threat really relevant in information technology companies as well with your PII data or your proprietary data because those guys do shift a lot, and with that, that information can be spread around. And then, you have critical infrastructures that are targets, such as your agriculture, your energy power sector, your water, your public health, your transportation. All those sectors could, have the insider threat. Basically what I'm trying to say here is that everybody is susceptible to this threat. It's not, just a government problem. It's not just a Department of Defense problem or, U.S. Army or anybody. It's everybody that's, targeted by insiders. Let's look at some of the historical examples of that. Not all insider threats are carried out using technology. So these aren't something new, and that's one of the lessons that we should learn from the WikiLeaks is that as organizations, we really don't learn from our lessons that we've been taught in the past from these kinds of incidents, such as the Ames espionage case, right? That was one of our worst security breaches in American intelligence history. Basically, Ames was a mediocre to poor performing CIA employee who had access to all types of top secret information, and he took that top secret information and he sold it to the Soviet Union, Soviet government. And in exchange, he got about $2 million worth of payment for it. He disclosed over 100 covert operations. His actions, he betrayed over 40 double agents, 10 of them which were executed as a result. And he pretty much crippled the CIA's ability to monitor Soviet activities from 1985 to 1994. And none of this was using information technology. This is just your standard espionage. But he would be an insider for the CIA. So just because our technology is advanced and stuff, it doesn't mean this is a new threat or a new risk to our organizations. It's always been there. Another very popular example is Robert Hansen, the FBI agent who spied for the Soviet intelligence services for about 22 years, from 1979 to 2001. He received just over $1.4 million in cash and jewels. So I guess some of that payment wasn't just cash. He liked diamonds and stuff too. He was very cautious when he did this. The Soviets didn't even know his identity. They even made a movie about it. I can't remember the title of the movie, but it's a decent film. But he disclosed thousands of classified secrets and double agents working for the U.S. He stated the FBI's security was pathetic and ineffective, and that was one of the reasons he did it. When the day he was actually caught, he asked the people that caught him, what took you so long, more or less. But what he did was he searched and accessed thousands of classified information files from his computer using just his default access right. And a lot of people blame the WikiLeaks case and the shift of thinking in the government from a need to know to a need to share kind of environment. But Robert P. Hansen happened before 9/11, so he had access back then. So that philosophy, sure, it has helped the information be wider distributed between different organizations, and that is a problem. But it's not the only problem, and it's not it's the insider that has always had this access to do these types of things. So in this instance, it was before 9/11, before we shifted our thought to need to share between organizations, and Robert Hanssen was still able to do this. All right, and like I said, it's not just DOD, FBI, CIA kind of people. There was actually 369 IRS employees in the Southwest region that was investigated for misusing the IRS Integrated Data Retrieval System. That integrated data retrieval system basically provides access to a bunch of PII data, such as taxpayer data as name, address, social security numbers, dependents, adjustable gross income, taxable income, tax liability, that type of data. So a bunch of PII data. And in 1993, about 56,000 of the IRS's 115,000 employees had access directly to that data, to that system. So, that's a little over half of the people that worked for the IRS had access to this type of data. And it was, the classification of that data is sensitive because it's PII. So their access controls or their risk methods of evaluating who should have what access, should have been looked at back then. But investigations and charges were filed for using government computers to create fraudulent tax refunds, and browsing through tax records of friends, relatives, neighbors, and celebrities. And one employee actually got reprimanded for approximately altering 200 accounts to receive kickbacks from those accounts for creating bogus refund checks. So it's not only just a state issue where we're looking at classified information and stuff. It can be other issues like this IRS thing. And here's another example. I'll probably pronounce this wrong, but the Societe Generale trading loss incident of 2008 had a gentleman named Jerome Carval, who was a mid-level stock trader who used his stolen passwords and routing paperwork to conceal fraudulent trades. He reportedly cost the bank more than $7.2 billion. Carval himself didn't actually profit from these fraudulent transactions. These trades were actually made to utilize or to make the bank look like it was making more money or to increase the bank's profits, and in the end actually boosting his performance rating. That is kind of what spawned this. Carval's previous year's bonus was about $500,000, so his motivation was if he could get his performance rating up, that bonus would be as good or better. He was found guilty in 2010 and ordered to pay $6.7 billion. That bank has said that they don't think they're going to get it back. But in that instance, he wasn't looking to sell secrets or anything. It was a financial gain kind of instance. Here's some sabotage instances. UBS Paine-Webber in 2002 had a gentleman named Roger De Niro, a system administrator at UBS Paine-Webber, he basically planted a logic bomb before resigning that deleted all files on over 2,000 servers. When he did this, the backups failed and files could not be recovered, so it caused a significant impact to the operations of UBS Paine-Webber. Durino was angry at receiving a $32,000 bonus instead of his normal $50,000 bonus, so he was the disgruntled employee that that got upset in as the insider, and he was a system administrator, so he had these things and he set this logic bomb. The interesting thing is the day that he left or resigned is he actually purchased put options, which are contracts which are a type of security that increases in value when the stock price drops. So he planted this logic bomb in these systems to delete all these files, and then that exact day went out and bought all these put options because he figured when he crashed all these systems, the stock prices would fail and he'd profit from it. So that's a financial gain, reactive kind of insider use case. DuPont trade secrets. This is another example where Gary Min was a research chemist at DuPont who admitted to stealing property or proprietary and technical information valued at about $4 million. He downloaded over 16,000 PDF documents from DuPont's electronic data library, and he downloaded approximately 22,000 abstracts from the DuPont's database. This was the most information downloaded material ever in DuPont's history. It was about 15 times higher than the next highest user in the EDL system. Once Min put in his resignation, they did a little audit and they pulled these statistics, and none of this was caught in real time. It was all caught after the fact. The other thing is all these use cases, none of them were really caught by technology when they occurred. They were caught after the fact based off of things that had occurred. And none of it was really using technology to do it. So are insider threats real? Insider threats, they're very real, and they can cause substantial damage to our organizations. I think those past several examples showed that they can have financial impacts, they can have reputational impacts, they can have operational impacts, and we really need to take them seriously. When we do our risk management and our defining our environment and what threats that we're going to see, that's one of the things that are normally overlooked is the insider, and you should put that in your risk management processes and think through those processes of separations of duties, pairing people up to do certain tasks, those types of things, so that you get the whole stance. So you should assume in your risk management and when you're carrying out these scenarios in that this person is rogue and he's in a system administration role, what can you do, or how can you combat that, or how can you stop that? So these are things we should be thinking about. Attacks from external threats may be greater in volume, but insider threats, they're just as devastating, if not more, and in more cases, they're likely to be successful and go undetected. So our external security perimeter defense devices and stuff like that we use to combat external threats on our risk management and those our security policies and those types of things. We always talk about the external threats and we always combat them, but it only takes one insider that has this incredible amount of information about our infrastructure to cause us major harm. Insider threats, they apply to everybody, no matter what the size or business sector. Attackers from insiders range in variety from very technically sophisticated to extremely low tech. It's wide range. You don't have to be a technical person. It could be, like the stock trader who harvested passwords and routing transcripts. He basically did that through observing them. He didn't hack into any database or did anything technical. He just casually observed these things, wrote them down, and he utilized them. So what are some of the advantages that the insider threat has on us? Insider threats, they bypass our traditional security boundaries and protection mechanisms. Things like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, access control systems, these things are designed normally to be implemented primarily to defend against the external threat, not really insider. The insider is already authenticated. He's already trusted. He's supposed to be at that computer doing those types of things. He's supposed to have access to this data to perform his job, those types of things. So our traditional security stuff doesn't really combat this stuff. Insiders tend to be very aware of the policies, procedures, and technology utilized within our organization. And basically, they're very aware of where things are vulnerable and reside in our system. Do we loosely enforce our policies and procedures? If they do something erroneous, do they actually get punished for it, or is it just a slap on the hand? Or is somebody going to report them, or is it as simple as going and telling somebody, "Oh, I made a mistake, don't worry about it"? And in reality, they are carrying out something that's going to cause our organization harm. Insiders know where the valuable data is, and normally know how to access that data. And that's an advantage from an external attacker who usually gains intelligence as he's been in a network or penetrated through a network or into our organizations. That attacker has to gain the knowledge of where that data is. And they'll do that through lateral movement, through scanning, and through observation, passive observation, those types of things. But that intelligence has to be gained over time, making it more likely for them to make a mistake and be caught with something like, a host-based IDS or antivirus program or some kind of NetFlow anomaly detection kind of stuff. But the insider, he knows where those databases are. He knows what credentials are required to get to that. He knows where stuff is stored in file cabinets and those types of things. So he doesn't have to gain that. So right at the get-go, he has way more intelligence than an external attacker. So are insider threats preventable? Insider threats, they can be stopped and they can be combated. But to do this, it's an extremely complex problem. Insider threats, they can only be prevented through a multi-layer defense strategy. You have to have a very good understanding of and acceptance of the insider threat. You need to know who that is and define that at different levels within your organization. When you're looking at it and you're analyzing it, you just have to assume that at every job role, if that person was an insider threat, what could they do to your organization? With that, it comes a very overwhelming task because very large organizations like governments and stuff, they have to think of that as thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, and that could be very hard. Where one way they can start to do that is by defining different rules and aligning that with stuff like classification of data and access control and those types of things. All right, so in doing that, you would develop and define policies and procedures for how things are carried out and how things are monitored, those types of things. And then you can implement things like technical controls to verify that that these things are happening. But how do you verify against the insider threat unless you've had an instance, right? So just because you haven't had an instance of an insider threat that you can document or claim, or somebody hasn't gotten public with the information they stole from you or gone to another organization, doesn't mean that it actually hasn't occurred. Many insider threats go unreported and undocumented, and in most cases it's because of the type of data that they're dealing with. So in the financial sector or business sector and public sector, not government sector, when somebody discloses information to another company, a lot of times that's settled outside of the outside of the courts, and it's a settlement between two people or two companies, and it's handled outside and not documented or reported. So it becomes very hard to verify. We must pay close attention to the different aspects within our organization, to include, our business policies, our procedures, our organizational culture. What is our management enforce? What do they don't enforce? Our technology environment. You got to really understand your organization. We must look beyond just the technology and into our organization's overall business processes and relationships between these processes and the technologies utilized. All right, so we'll go a little bit through some of the insider threat detection technology that we have. I work for a company called NitroSecurity. We have several products in that line, so this is not supposed to be product specific, but these are some of the things that I can pull out for a presentation to show you some of these different technologies. All right, so SIEM, it's a security information and event management. It's sometimes defined as a set of technologies for things like log data collection, aggregation, normalization, retention, analysis, and workflow. But basically what it does, it takes a bunch of data from a bunch of different devices, brings it all in, and makes it meaningful. It aggregates on it. It normalizes into things that we can understand. Because in an environment where you deploy a SIEM, you're going to be getting billions of events from all different types of things. You're going to bring it in, and you're going to need to be able to look at it. So you're going to have billions of things. You're only going to want to look at 1,000 things that need to stand out, and that's what a SIEM does. The sad thing about SIEM is that most driving factors for getting a SIEM in an organization is compliance more than it is for security operational efficiency. It pays high dividends in security operational efficiency, but most times it's driven by compliance, which isn't a bad thing, but the tool is so much more powerful than just meeting a checkbox to say you're compliant with certain standards. So what does SIEM do, right? So SIEM basically brings in content awareness around events. We have this little log line here where it's SSH login. If you were to look at that line and raw logs and such, it may be cryptic to you. Things like DNS, those types of things. It may look a little cryptic. What a SIEM will do is take multiple events and it'll put meaning behind these odd strings and define that. It'll give you the context around the event that occurred. But it's still evolving, and what SIEM is going to is from the context awareness into the content awareness. And what that is it's getting devices from things like DLP devices, application-aware devices, those types of things. It can look into and discover anomalies and threats inside of stuff like proprietary formats and documents and emails and the different types of protocols and applications that we have out there. It can also look into things like tracking sessions into databases and sessions in between different types of applications, how they interact with that, and it decode those things. So SIEM is evolving into more from a context awareness where it just provides additional data such as, this IP actually is this host name, into content awareness where you can track a user as he traverses through different applications and he uses different technologies. What's great about how SIEM is developing is you get this giant broad correlation honeypot where you just throw all this data in there, and if you have the correlation around it, you can bring out things like the insider threats. Those can be brought up to the front and shown to you quickly and relatively simply. And you can also look at some of the advanced threats, malwares. These things start to highlight it. So you get all these thousands of different billions of different events and stuff in it. And what SIEM does is it correlates it all and just kind of brings out the things that you're interested in. Well, let me take you through a content-aware forensics use case here. So basically, a user performs a query against a SQL server, resulting in a record set of a threshold of over 1,000 rows from a privileged table. That basically represents a data access policy violation. So this is how technology kind of enforces the policy violation. This offending user then prints this data, resulting in SQL query results to a PDF document, which is then attached to an email using a Google Web account. That email is then sent to an unauthorized external address without corporate or email disclaimer. That same person also jumps on IM chat and to an IAM user not in the registered whitelist. So if you have IAM internally, he's messaging somebody that's not in your whitelist, and he's providing the sensitive data outside. So how does content awareness help this? Basically, content awareness, in a context, all you would get is logs that are saying this, but you really wouldn't know, what was that data that was returned from 1,000 rows? Did he actually send it out in the email? Those types of things. So content, our context won't provide you that. That's where the context of the forensics SIEM comes into play. And you can see stuff like the SQL session history. You can actually decode the MIME encoded email and look for the from and to address to make rules to match for these types of things. You can also get a full IAM session transcript of the conversation that's going on. It allows you to identify the offending material internally. It shows you basically what actually happened. If you were trying to do this with just, say, net flows or IDS alerts or just logs off of systems and stuff, you wouldn't have this awareness. This is what content brings to this use case. All right, so let's actually look at the WikiLeaks use case and what actually went down and what happened there. Just some background information. PFC Bradley Manning, he's accused of it. He's not found guilty yet because he hasn't been done. It hasn't gone to court and had his day in court and such. So, accused of leaking classified documents from the SIPRnet, the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network. That's the government's where they house all their classified type information, sensitive type of information. It's they actually have two network connections. They have a NIPRnet and a SIPRnet. SIPRnet, you have to be a vetted background check, have a clearance, that type of thing to log into this information. And that's kind of how they share information between organizations and such. But on June 2010, a gentleman named Adrian Lamo, who was a former hacker that is kind of questionable on why he came out with this, his motives and his credibility on this because of incidents he had in the past. If you're interested, go look him up. He was reported to U.S. authorities that Specialist Bradley Manning had leaked classified information to him himself. Lamo, he shared chat logs with federal agents, WikiLeaks, and the media. Lamo also claims that Manning confessed to leaking the video footage that was real popular back on July of 2007 of the Baghdad airstrike incident. That had a lot of media coverage about 12 months ago. But is this possibly the largest government classified data leakage event ever in history, with suspected over 260,000 classified and sensitive documents leaked? That's not confirmed yet because the cables that have been released isn't at that number yet, but it's suspected it's about 260,000 documents. Manning reportedly stated that to Lamo, and this is the second hand here, he utilized a CD rewritable disk labeled as Lady Gaga to exfiltrate the data from his computer and the SIPRnet. What he said he did was he would bring the CD in, he'd put it in a CD drive, and he would lip sync Lady Gaga as he was writing data to this disk and just hand carrying it out. He utilized encryption such as Tor, or he utilized encryption and he used Tor and privately coordinated servers with WikiLeaks main spokesman Julian Assange to upload this data after it was exfiltrated. Now, I have to say that all this stuff is just accusations because it's secondhand account from Adrian Lamo, but this is kind of the scenario that everybody's basing this off of it and what is suspected of happening. But until he's found guilty of this, this is all just hearsay. All right, so what's the overview? It's a classic example of an authorized insider abusing the trusts and privileges. PFC Manning, he had to have access to classified information. He was a security analyst. He needed to do that for his job. So it wasn't like he had broke into anything or he was outside of his realm. He was actually accessing data that he would have usually accessed in maybe not in the rate that he did or the volumes that he did, but it was stuff that he had permissions to. Now there's a debate on, should that information have expired and those types of things, and those are where you strengthen your policies and your procedures, and sure, the government should probably look at that. But what are some of the major hurdles for technology in this use case? Well, in monitoring something like the U.S. government network with file access and this type of stuff, there's going to be massive amounts of data that has to be handled and populated. So a typical file server, just a general file server on its own in a decent-sized environment will generate millions of events in a day. If you apply that to the hundreds of thousands of computers that the government probably houses most of this types of information, you end up with billions and billions of events. That becomes a technology problem because it's very tough to store that stuff in stuff like a database or in a file system and be able to access it for analytical purposes. The user, in this case, is also trusted and requires this file access to this sensitive information. The monitor environment, this environment, the SIPRnet, where we're monitoring like file access and computer usage and stuff like that, it's a dynamic environment. As intelligence is gathered and added to the network, access and to these files and these types of things, it's going to change daily. It's not like we can say that a normal analyst accesses 35 files in these 6 categories every day, and anybody that does anything different than that, we should probably look at. We can't say that because depending on the different threat levels, what's going on, what's happening in different places, the intelligence they have and they're sharing within themselves, the access rates for these files, the characteristics of where they're going and looking at this information is going to change. So you need something that's very dynamic. Policy and compliance monitoring must be capable of identifying complicated violations. And complicated violations is that dynamic kind of use case. Also, being able to correlate things like those type of dynamic environments with stuff that's going on the host itself. And who would have thought that even though the DoD had blocked the USB drive usage, disabling that type of stuff, who would have thought somebody would write on a CD-RW? Well, he was able to do that. So correlating that kind of complex information, that kind of complex use case is very tough. But if we're going to do this, we have to take that into consideration. So how does our SIEM address these kind of major hurdles? Well, we have unmatched speed. We can support over 600,000 events per second in a single appliance. Scale is basically unlimited. You just add an additional box. But what does all that mean? So you're going to want to do user tracking reporting across multiple systems, across multiple platforms, and multiple applications all in one place. You can't be looking at file access logs on the server and then trying to hand correlate that with every analyst's desk. That's just not going to happen. So that's where a SIEM can help address this kind of information. So the dynamic environment, right? So how can you do that? Well, we can't just set variables in there and say, hey, 35 access attempts, that's bad, or 35 access in these different categories and such is bad. You can't do that. So you need stuff like increases over the baseline, which is dynamically calculated, so the total number of files by a single user over a period such as in seconds, minutes, hours, and days, and even years. You need a system that can do that kind of thing. Detect these anomaly suspicious activities. And just because it's anomalous does not necessarily mean that it is bad. Like I said, threats change, but it gives you somewhere to start and drill into. Increases such as baselines from access to specific file categories and file classifications by a single user. If that single user is accessing different classifications than every other user on it, that might be something that they could look at, and the system needs to be able to handle that and calculate that and present that to you. And another interesting thing is in the WikiLeaks use cases, a lot of the cables that were leaked were files that had been fairly old and probably not accessed in a certain amount of time. So one of the simple correlations would be to assess access to a file that has not been accessed by another user in a set time frame or time period. And that time period could be 6 months. It's a stale document. Why is this person accessing hundreds of documents that haven't been accessed by anybody else in a relatively long time? But the hurdle of getting that information into something that can comprehend that is the tough part. So how else do we address it? Baselines are calculated on context-related data for risk management to provide a clear picture of event severity and potential impact within the environment. It may be hard to see the slide and how it works here, but basically you can see in this little use case that we did a snapshot here is we've got 2 different file servers feeding in information. One, we have like unclassified data and sensitive data, and we've classified these different documents at different severity levels to depict it. They have multiple domains, and it kind of just highlights what's hot, what's not, and what the risk aspect for those types of things are. And what you're wanting to do is visually be able to see this so that you can drill into it to see stuff like increase in the total calculated severity over the baseline by any single user. So you need to be able to see on a user basis how he's traversing in and out of that network and those types of things. Also, correlation is a key capability for any technology that's going to try to attack the insider threat. Obviously, your policies and procedures and those types of things in your vetting process, your background checks, those things are extremely important to initially vet them, but as you go along, you have to correlate certain things, right? So things you need an automated identification of what events or chain of events require immediate attention, things to bring stuff out, and you need something that will correlate this data to do that for you. And here's some possible correlation things that could happen, stuff like any single user that generates more than one baseline anomaly over a set period of time, meaning that those baselines that we were talking about earlier, where they're dynamically calculated, if he has generated more than one of those, give me a higher alert for that, and let me look at that. Why is he setting off multiple alarms? If, in general log management and just general content SIEM, you don't get that type of stuff. This is where the content awareness and the extreme correlation comes into play. So just to summarize the use case around this, it's a classic example of an authorized insider abusing trusts and privileges. Some of the major hurdles related to this in its use case is that the government has to overcome, and anybody has to overcome, is the massive amounts of data that will be generated from doing file access monitoring or user tracking. The user is already trusted. He requires access to this data, so it's not abnormal for them to access sensitive data in itself. So access controls and encryption and those types of things, they fail at this because the person needs to be able to read the document. The person needs to be able to access the document. The monitor environment is very dynamic and changes rapidly. We don't have stale networks. They're doing different things. That's their job, is to gather intelligence and go through this. Object access monitoring must be capable of identifying complicated policy and compliance violations using the dynamic baseline anomaly detection. And we went over how we address these things with unmatched speed, being able to track an individual user, and the type of reporting capabilities, the dynamic baselining, the dynamic event severity calculation kind of capabilities, based off of how you classify different files, and the severity rating for accessing those files, and maybe time of day, those types of things. And that all falls into the unlimited correlation capabilities. So the WikiLeaks use case, let's look at some additional monitoring views and examples that could be utilized to address something like the insider threat. Here's just a general operational console that, and I highlighted in orange some of the areas to bring out what's going on here. So it's something to give you a total environmental awareness of what's going on, and what you can drill into from there to detect these anomalies. So you have your data sources, you have the overall event risk, you have the types that these events generated, the different types of things, so success or failure, the domains that they came from, that they authenticated from, what domains are coming from, are hotter than other ones, or are at higher risk than other ones. The individual servers that they're accessing, is it accessing more sensitive data on this server or this server, those types of things. The individual users, the risk level per user based off of what they're doing on a system, and then the specific files and folders and such that they're traversing, and if there's any anomalies in that. And then all on this individual console, you also have the details to see the whole action of everything that's been tracked. So this is what a SIEM does for you. It provides you this single pane, nice snapshot, but it also needs to provide you the ability to get to the individual details to see if that was actually a bad anomaly or a good anomaly, like the guy's doing a better job, so he's accessing more data, he's investigating something, or is it something abnormal where he's accessing a pattern of data and he's downloading it to his local computer and then putting it on a CD-ROM and going to walk out the front door with it. Here's a general risk and severity overview. This is that dynamic baselining capabilities. You can see this with the blue line. It's calculated based off of historical data that's across the board. So your total risk distribution would be based off of how high the severity count is for the events at any given specific time. You can see peaks, you can see valleys, those types of things. If you see anything abnormal in this, there might be an area that you would drive into and look at that time frame to see what users were active during that, what files were accessed, what domains were they coming from, what were they doing at that time. So it gives you a nice, simple graph, something that's very easy and not extremely flashy or anything, but gives you somewhere that you can drill or start your investigation. Because the hard part is, was it a good anomaly or a bad anomaly? And then, another thing you may want to look at is the average risk distribution based off these severity scores. And in this environment, it's pretty leveled out. There's nothing that really sticks out. There's a couple peaks that you may want to look into, but in this little example here, there's not a lot out of the abnormal going on. Some other thing it may do is, in the WikiLeaks use cases, how do you identify, or in any use case, how do you identify what or who was actually accessing these types of things? So a lot of intelligence for these type of violation stuff comes after the information has been disclosed. So you find out that these 6 documents were disclosed, or these 20 documents or these 2,000 documents or whatever it is have been disclosed, and you know that they've been there. So you need to be able to drill down from that and show who that was. Or you suspect these individual people were doing that. And that's what a SIEM will do. It allows you to, you would take those 6 documents and you would drill from in them and to see where who did it at what times and that kind of thing. And you may also classify your different organizations, because we know that organizational temperament, or how an organization is feeling, or the philosophies in our individual organizations plays a lot into the insider. So we have different management implementations all over our different sections of our organization, and one section may be more susceptible to become a vengeance because they don't like their management, right? They may do something or act out with sabotage, or another one may have lax policies where that manager just like babies his individual people and doesn't enforce policies and doesn't, he's more of a friend than he is a boss. So being able to look at that based off of like domains, because they may be different domains that authenticate into our central network, is important. So in this case, we have a west region that is a little hotter than the east region. These types of views into these data structures are extremely important to visually bring it out to an end user. You can also see the individual servers and the users, and you get that time frame distribution of what's going on during these time frames and such. So the technologies that you try to use to gather insiders, they're only going to get you about 50% of the way, but when they do get you that 50% of the way, and you're using your policies and procedures and stuff to vet these people, you need something that can give you these pivot points inside this data, because these are normal things that are occurring in your network and in your environment that you need different viewpoints and access and pivot tables to get into it and to see what's abnormal and what is just regular and normal. All right, so that pretty much sums up today's webcast. I can answer any questions that we have now, and Greg, if you want to field those, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy Conway. That was a terrific presentation, very substantial. I'm sure our audience has some questions. You still have time to email them in via the screen. We have a few that have come in. Jeremy, I want to give you a chance to take a sip of water.
Yeah, I was getting a little dry there.
Okay, we got one coming in. Can SIEM monitoring be focused on specific potential suspects?
Yes, it can. If you know who those potential suspects are and such, you can set them as somebody that you're going to watch on a watch list, or you're going to put in a correlation group, or you can put them in a domain group or something, and you can get additional information and add additional severity ratings to them and context around that. So yeah, a SIEM could monitor individual people. And a lot of times a SIEM can actually highlight to a person who they should be monitoring. If somebody's hot over a certain amount of times because their severity rating of the actions they're performing inside of an environment highlights them, that may be somebody that you auto-populate into a watch list to see what's going on over time. And if over time that person starts to decrease in its severity rating, you can migrate them off and understand that that's a normal activity for that person, and that's part of his job role or function inside the company.
Okay. And does a SIEM provide real-time visibility or after-the-fact reports?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I kind of cut out.
Yeah, does a SIEM provide real-time visibility or after-the-fact reports?
Okay, so a SIEM provides both. A operational SIEM, I can't say that all SIEM technology will do this, but I will say that an operational and effective SIEM will do both. It will allow you to have the real-time visibility of what's going on in the environment at any given time period, and be able to pivot that data to investigate those individual occurrences of what's going on. But it also has the ability to run your monthly reports, your weekly reports, your quarterly reports, those types of things. Those are two very fundamental principles in SIEM that if you are in the market for that, or you are evaluating that they should be high on your list to make sure that you're getting what you need out of that, and based on your organizational needs of what type of data depictions and stuff that you're looking at.
Okay. How can a large database download be detected?
So that's one of the use cases that's tough on SIEM, and the only way to do that is if you have auditing on a database or something, you may actually see that through log files. Well, that's where a lot of SIEMs fall on their face, because DBAs won't turn that type of auditing on because of performance hits and those types of things. So you need an additional thing, such as a database monitor or something that monitors the actual application. And you can actually see these large file transfers or these limit ratings of it returned more than 1,000 lines or more than 100 lines, those types of things. One of the common things that you can detect is between an application and a database, because the application uses the same username to log into a database every single time that's driving some type of web activity or ERP system or something like that. It's usually a one-to-one relationship. He will ask a question, return one answer or a set of answers, and that set of answers is normally within a certain range. With a database activity monitoring system that feeds into a SIEM or a application monitoring system, you can actually look at that data and set thresholds around that and characteristics to fire off anomalous and events and those types of things.
Okay. How does it determine the severity of each individual file?
Also, in the use cases, how file severity would be categorized is, in general, that event has a severity level set by a SIEM itself. That is set in its rule definition or its policy definition on the monitoring device that's being monitored. Each individual file can then be set within the SIEM as higher classifications or lower classifications. Let's say that you have a file server that has multiple shares on it, and each individual folder has different types of data, and different people can access these different types of data. What you would do is you would map the folders or the events from those folders to have a higher severity rating. So basically the user could define the context on that data. But if the user doesn't want to do that, because that can be a little bit of work, and most SIEM takes a little bit of work to actually get into an operational deployment, because you need it tailored to your organization and meet your goals. So there's many man-hours you have to put in to make things better and more visible. But you can also do things with like content awareness, where it actually looks for the type of data that's inside the system or inside the documents that are being transferred and such. So severity rating could be raised based off the content that's in the document, looking for keywords or certain headers that you put on certain documents, those types of things.
That anticipates this next question. How would a SIEM have prevented WikiLeaks?
So SIEM would not prevent WikiLeaks. That's an insider threat that had a problem where he was vetted. There's basically no technology out there that would completely prevent an instance of an insider. That is a combinational threat. That's what we're trying to gather out of here, is even without technology, we had insider threats. Remember Ames and Henson, they had absolutely no technology, and they were still able to disclose thousands of secret documents to the Soviets. What SIEM and other technology, combined with your policies and your procedures and your risk management stuff, is bring the capability to detect these types of things and to bring to light, so that maybe you can raise the probability of you being successful at identifying these threats and stopping them before they happen. Where a SIEM could potentially stop an insider threat is when you see these anomalies, if your security people actually react to it and investigate these incidents. But in like the WikiLeaks case, where there was absolutely no monitoring going on, well, it's suspected that absolutely no monitoring was going on, or no profiling of how the individuals access different files, or our classification documents expiring, these types of things, or these procedures going on, is stuff being maintained. None of that was recorded. They had absolutely a very low probability of ever identifying somebody doing this, and it's obvious with the WikiLeaks case. So it just raises the probability that you can detect it. It won't absolutely prevent the insider threat from happening. And there isn't a technology that is going to just, stamp it, this isn't going to ever happen again.
Okay, got it. What is the anticipation of false positives using a SIEM? How long will it take to minimize this effect?
So that is a problem with all technology. That's a problem with anything that takes events in that has rules based off of it, context based off it, especially when you're detecting anomalies. It takes time, and it takes it depends on the person that's doing it. Certain people have better capabilities and understanding of their network environments, and they can do it in a very short amount of time. The technology that should help you do that is a SIEM that can do things like dynamically calculate what is normal and what isn't normal, and then you can supplement that with additional information that you have, the context that you have, or the awareness that you have in your environment. So take, for example, let's say you work for an organization such as NASA. NASA, 3 months, in any given quarter there's 3 months. In one of those quarters they have a space mission, right? So in 2 of the months, if you did your dynamic baselining on the 2 months that they didn't have a mission, or they sent a shuttle or something like that, the network activities they would see is probably going to be fairly standardized, right? Because it's just normal individuals. Well, as soon as they launch a shuttle or something like that, then you have the public and stuff coming into their network and causing havoc on that type of baselining and stuff. So, An individual, well, the system would be able to dynamically detect and guide the user to how to normalize that information to make sure that you lower your false positives, but you also have the environmental awareness of an end user or a person that's configuring this to know that in that third month we're going to get raised activity, and that may spawn off anomalous false positives, and incorporate that intelligence into the system itself. So it's basically based off the capabilities of the person and the technology that's driving it. And it's going to range in different environment deployments.
Well, this might be a complement to that. How can you handle a person that only retrieves a few files per day for, say, a period of over a month? Will this type of person show up?
So that type of person would probably show up at the the lower risk rate, right? So not all anomalies have to be high volume, high rate, but you would see them at a lower rate, and you would probably begin to investigate that person not in a security context, but in a job performance context. So if this person's issue was he was supposed to access this data to gather intelligence, such as in the WikiLeaks case, if this person only accessed like 5 or 6 files a day, they would be on the lower end of that and seeing this type of thing. But with that, it's also possible if those 5 or 6 files were in certain categories that you had high severities for, or these records were maybe not accessed in the last 6 months, or maybe not in the last year, those types of things, that could set off a high severity rate and bring that person to front because he's accessing documents that may not have been accessed over a set period of time. So it just depends on what those files are and how they were actually accessed. It just comes down to, it's kind of vague on how it would be done. That person could be highlighted, but it would just have to be off the different use cases of how they accessed and exactly what files they were doing and how you were actually monitoring it.
Okay. And who sets content awareness? Is it automatic by NitroSecurity or set by the organization knowing possible threat scenarios?
No, so content awareness isn't set by NitroSecurity. It's something that we pride ourselves in, and there's a lot of content awareness out there. DLP provides a lot of content awareness, and basically that is, that is leakage prevention kind of devices. And what that means is they can understand the application layer, and they can look in there for usernames and those types of things. So it's not a setting that you set. It's devices that you feed into a SIEM that has that information. A lot of SIEMs don't know how to use content-type information. It's not that they can't, or they just don't have that understanding or that technology built into the SIEM yet to take those additional data feeds to correlate it with the context information to make it meaningful. In NitroSecurity, because we have some of this content awareness devices that we've built inside, we've built that into our SIEM, which makes it easier for us to marry. It's not like we're partnering with a third-party source. We can take DLP from other sources and stuff, but we're not partnering with somebody else and getting this new information and not really knowing what to do with it besides blast it on the screen and let you run reports on it. We actually have taken the time to look at what this content will provide us and the different viewpoints and pivot points that this additional information will give our customers a better understanding of what's going on and around the situation and how it can be used because we have it in-house and we do it together. But it's not just a NitroSecurity thing, and it can be multiple different devices.
Got it. Somebody's asking, I know this is based on requirements, but what is the estimated time to implement a SIEM solution?
That's going to be dependent on the type of SIEM that you're deploying. We've had successful use cases in SIEM deployments in as little as a week. We've had successful deployments with very large government organizations over this period of months. It basically depends on the capabilities of the person that's implementing it and the team that's behind implementing it. If SIEM's something that is new to your organization and maybe you've only ever done, say, syslog collection and such, there may be a learning curve that we need to get over. And there may be implementation things. Sometimes one of the recommendations as I do professional services for NitroSecurity and help people implement SIEM is one of the common mistakes is to drop SIEM in place and then just blast everything at it at once and then become overwhelmed with the information and not be able to tune it. So one of the things that we like to do is look at the different type of devices and the goals of the organization of what is important to them, bring those important sources in, tune them, and then start feeding additional sources. So the time frame will be dependent upon what is the organization's goals, what are their capabilities in-house, and is this not new technology? And what are they trying to meet? If it's just a compliance checkbox that you've got reports generating on different access, that's a simple installation, it's a simple training. If you're going to use this in a actual security operations center and you're going to make this drive different incidents inside your organization, we have to build the use cases around that and build those type of views for you and that type of stuff. So it becomes less of the, the normal implementation. It may take, it could take a month. It could take 2 months. It just depends on the amount of volume and the organization that's deploying it, basically.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. We have time. We have about 5 more minutes for questions. Are you ready for some more?
Yep, get into the water.
Okay. What if someone turned off the Windows security logging?
Oh, so that's actually a really nice one, because if they turn that off, you get a high event from Windows, right? Because if you clear the events, it says you get a generated event record that says event record cleared, or if it was turned, that would be monitored, that'd be an event. That's a basic use case for a SIEM. It should get reported back. Also, if that device hasn't reported to a SIEM in a certain amount of time, the SIEM is smart enough to know, hey, this thing hasn't reported in 30 minutes. Either there's a configuration issue, there's a network issue, and it should generate a self-alert and inform the end user.
Okay. What's the hardest part of deploying your SIEM for a typical company?
Typically, it's identifying the company's goals and use cases around SIEM. Typically, it's what is important and bringing that to light. What are they trying to get out of it? And then once we've identified that, then it's simply moving forward with executing to get to that goal.
Okay. Can you filter for specific words or phrases or number sequences?
So you can filter in multiple ways. You can filter on the collection and the normalization and categorization of data. So you can filter as the data it comes into a SIEM, but you can also filter in your queries. So that's very important, and especially in the WikiLeaks use case. Let's say we had 1,000 documents that we know were disclosed on this date, and it had to be accessed between 2 dates. So one of the basic filters that you'd want to do with that is show me every single user that accessed these 1,000 files. In a SIEM solution like Nitro, you would drop that into the file area where that file name is stored, and you would apply a filter, render a view, and you could see who actually accessed that during those time frames. So that's, it can be filtered on the reporting side and the view side and the operational side, and it can also be reported or filtered on the collection side. Especially when you have a solution like ours that has a SIEM and log management built in, you may want to filter what goes into your SIEM where you want everything to go into your log management. So you have general events that occur that you may not think are of interest to correlate, and you just want to send to log management. So you can filter up front there too.
Are there issues and workarounds that you have to build into your SIEM plan for encrypted data?
Well, anytime that encryption is involved, you definitely have to plan around that in implementation. It just depends on the type of device feed it is and such, and it's the pairing. Obviously, if the data is encrypted, the SIEM won't understand it, so it has to have the mechanism to unencrypt the data and present it in the SIEM the way it needs to be done.
Okay.
With that, you have stuff like syslog that's secure, those types of things. The RFC is very young and stuff, but most SIEMs and receivers and collectors can do that. Also on database transactions and stuff, you have the ability to be the man in the middle for SSL or use the Oracle certificate to be the person to get that awareness. So there's solutions around it. There's SSL proxies, those types of things that will bring that data back to it. It's not really the SIEM's sole responsibility to do the decryption. It's to utilize the tools and stuff that will do the decryption to then decipher the data and present it to the end user. It's just another use case that you have to work through.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Before that, Jeremy, for those questions we didn't get to, is there an email or a website our viewers can refer to after this webcast?
I believe I can get with Jerry, and he'll get something posted on the NitroSecurity website to get these additional questions. I don't have a specific one right offhand. I apologize for that.
Okay. Then let's see. Does NitroSecurity have a comprehensive list of use cases?
Yes, that's one of the things that NitroSecurity does internally. We don't only just look at like technology use cases and features and stuff that's going on, but we develop a use case document on our website. We have multiple use cases that you can walk through and see, how different people use them. But that's part of one of my main roles at the company is to, as I do professional services stuff, document the summarization or the overall goals of different organizations and look at how they're doing different things and the needs, and then basically bring that back to NitroSecurity and say, hey, does this use case fully met with our SIEM, or could it be better met by adding feature X, Y, Z, or looking at the data differently? So we have a whole team that's set up just to do that inside of NitroSecurity.
Okay, and with that, we'll have to wrap it up. So with that, thank you, Jeremy Conway, for a terrific presentation, and thank you, everybody out there, for tuning in.